I can't talk today. Hey everybody, it's Kira. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be about what I've been reading recently. So you may have noticed that I have not put out a wrap-up video in 4 months, and that is mostly from my laziness, honestly. I've filmed probably 3 wrap-ups and just have not gotten around to editing them. By the time I do, it's usually near the end of the next month, and so I've just given up. So, we're here to talk about what I've been reading recently, and I'm dividing this into 2 different videos so that I'm not here talking to you for literally an hour about all the books that I've read. So this video is going to be standalones and my one reread, which is part of a series, but we'll get to that later. And then the next video is going to be the series that I have read. So, without further ado, let's get into this. So these are not going to be in a specific order, it's just kind of whatever order I put them in when I wrote them down. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Milk and Honey by Ruby Kaur. This is a poetry collection, and I'm not one to usually like poetry. I'm just not a huge fan of it. There were a couple of poems in it that I really enjoyed, but overall I just didn't like it. It just wasn't for me. But that may have partially been because I read it on my computer as an ebook that I checked out from my library, and I don't normally read books online, so that may have affected my enjoyment of the reading as well. But it was a really deep book, but I don't know, poetry is just really not my thing. The next book I'm going to talk about is NickSIA by Scott Rainton. This was in my LitDroid Crate box for September, and I read it and I finished it right before September ended, and it was pretty cool. It's about this corporation who is sending people to space, but it's a competition, and there's a lot of money at stake if you win this competition. And so the main character, Emmett, gets picked for this competition, so he gets to go to this planet called Eden, and along the way he's competing with he's competing for 10 spots to go to this planet. And NickSIA is this material that you can shift with your mind and make it into pretty much anything. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and it's the first book in a new series, but this one just came out, so I'm putting it in my standalones for now. But it was really good, and I really enjoyed it. Next up is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This is the newly updated textbook version of the book that Harry and his friends use at Hogwarts, and which Newt Scamander has written. I actually bought my specific copy when I was on my mission trip in the Czech Republic. I bought this on our free day in Prague. Super fun. Really enjoyed that day. Oh, the whole trip was amazing. Anyways, I own the original 2001 textbook edition, but I knew that they'd gotten redone, and so I really wanted to get them, but I found this cover which was super cool, and so I got the book while I was in Czech. It's cool because the updated version has some of the beasts that are in the Fantastic Beasts movie, which are not featured in the original textbook. And there's a little note at the beginning from Newt Scamander, which was super cool, so I really enjoyed reading it. Next up is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This I read, and I don't know how I feel. It's about a girl who's an illegal immigrant and her family is about to be deported, and it's her last day in the US, and she meets this boy who is a Korean. He's a Korean descendant. His parents are Korean immigrants, and they end up spending the day together and they end up falling in love. Now, I knew that this was an insta-love story going in, so it's hard to say that I didn't see it coming, but I was still kind of annoyed with the insta-love stuff just because I don't really like insta-love usually. It was cool because the book brought up a lot of topics about immigrants and about your fate and your destiny and following in your parents' footsteps, and there was a lot of deep topics that were brought up in the book, but I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know. Next up is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I got this with my Book of the Month subscription, and oh my goodness, I love this book. So this is about this girl named Aza who's trying to figure out this mystery of this missing billionaire. It's more about her struggle with her mental illness. She has OCD and anxiety, and there were so many really cool and really good passages in this book that really connected with me. The plot, honestly, like the missing billionaire plot takes more of a back seat. It's so much more a character-driven story about Asa. I loved it so much. I tabbed it, as you can see. It was also very funny. Asa's best friend Daisy is hilarious. I really liked her character as well. But it was just, the whole book was just so good. There were so many things I could connect with on a personal level with this book. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. Like I said before, the plot is not a huge thing. It's way more about her mental struggle. But it's so well done, so well written, and I loved it so much. This is probably one of my absolute favorite books that I've read this year, which is, I've read a lot of good books this year, but this was definitely just one that I could really connect to. And lastly, I'm going to talk about my reread for this segment, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. So, I read this originally back in, I don't know, early spring, I think, or late winter, one of the two. I read this really early on in the year, and I fell in love with it, and I love this book so much, and I actually tabbed, like, some of my favorite scenes, and I've gone back and reread them just because they're just so good. But this transition to college has been really difficult, and especially the first month, and even last month too, it's been really hard living so far away from my family, which I've never done before. I mean, I've been gone from my family, but never like this long. And I struggle making friends, and so I haven't really found a good friend group yet. And so I was really just wanting a piece of something familiar, because everything here is just so unfamiliar. And so I reread this just to like have that feeling of familiarity and like, okay, I know what this is. I know where this is going. And it was just so good. If you don't know what this book is about, it's hard to explain. It's about this fantasy world in which there's like this ruling empire, and so the main character, Laia, she is one of like the scholars who are kind of like, who are kind of down at the bottom end of the like hierarchy. Her brother gets taken captive, and so she decides to join this rebellion and become a slave in order to help save her brother. Now, the other main character is Elias. He's Mask, which is a soldier in the Empire's army, and he is going to desert, but then gets roped into staying. And so eventually these two meet, and it's just, there's so much that happens in here. So this is the first book. A Torch Against the Night is the second book, and the third book comes out in April, which is called A Reaper at the Gates. And they're just so amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. It's told from dual point of view. The characters are so wonderful. The plot is really intricate and really cool, and the setting is really scary, but it's also really amazing. And so it was just so nice to come back to something that was familiar and something that I knew that I enjoyed, and I just had a lovely time rereading this. This is my absolute favorite book but Turtles was so good. I don't know, it's also one of my top books that I've read this year. So those are all the books I'm going to talk about today. Be sure and look out for my second part to this video of all the series that I've read recently. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I now have a Twitter, which is @CuriousKickinReads, and I will leave that down in the description below, as well as my Goodreads link and my email. So that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!